Breaking toxic family cycles is not for the weak. And when placed under the perpetual whiplash of emotionally immature parents, breaking cycles feels like it's breaking you. Today, I'm sitting down with Cara for an incredibly personal and powerful conversation about her journey growing up with emotionally immature and neglectful parents. She describes the profound sense of loneliness she experienced as a child and the moment she realized that the love she craved from her parents was never going to come. But Cara's story is not just about hardship. It's about healing, empowerment, and rebuilding life on her own terms. If you've ever questioned your own self-worth because of family dynamics, Cara's story will resonate pretty deeply long after the video ends. Feel free to share your own experiences below and leave a thumbs up as you listen. Let's jump off with what brought you here today to want to even share anything about your personal life in the first place.
Well, I will say it is a very brave thing to jump on something like this to share your story. I had a lot of apprehension initially, wanting to do it, wanting to share my experience because I feel like whenever I've shared it before, people have been grateful for the insight or the experience or the healing process. And that's sort of part of my legacy. I don't have my own children. So, I guess all y'all are my children and I want to leave something behind that you're my
That's right.
and and I want to be able to pass that along. Yes, I could pass that along to family members who are receptive. The number of those who are receptive is very small. Actually, it's zero right now. So let's give it away for free because I feel like when you come out of a one particular family culture and joined another, for a lot of American middle class kids coming out of the 80s, it was you just went to college and you just sort of figured it out. But, just as a generation, we were sort of left alone to our own devices more often than not. In fact, it's very popular on social media. You'll see people talk about how parents needed a reminder on television. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
They're
Some of
like,
it's
oh
10
shit,
o'clock.
no, actually, I don't.
So I guess just sort of we can do a very general intro. Really, this story is about me and it's not about the other characters in my story. And also, their story is their story. And I would like to be respectful because that's who I am, regardless of how someone else treated me. It doesn't mean I need to treat them like that in return. So I grew up with parents who were both college educated. One had an advanced degree, the other had started an advanced degree. So we were privileged, if you will, upper white middle class people living in a nice home. Unfortunately, what happened for us was the real estate explosion, the bubble burst in 1986. Just dated myself. And with one parent who was a broker and the other was an attorney in real estate. I mean, we just sort of lost everything. And the dream house we built became a nightmare house. And there was a lot of tension, a lot of stress, and just trying to survive as a family. And of course, I was starting middle school and all of the things that come along with puberty. And it was extraordinarily stressful. A lot of cortisol spikes in those days. And I would say that probably the first 9 years of my life were pretty idyllic. I didn't know any different. When you grow up a certain way, you just take that as normal. And then it's only really later in life that, someone else will point out, hey,
That wasn't normal.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And you realize that your reaction to the world, the way that you're operating according to your own culture, is different somehow. And so you look into that a little bit deeper. We both were afforded the opportunity to go to college. We went on vacations. We had a vacation home on a lake, and we would go skiing from there. We had the opportunity to go to Europe.
Wow.
So, we had a lot of privileges that other people don't have. I've seen on social media where people will say, yeah, if you had a staircase in your house, you were rich. And I was like,
Yeah. Exactly. You're like, "Oh,
That's a
wait,
real
we were
perspective
rich." Yeah.
change. You know? So, I do recognize that, despite our financial hardships, we stopped the newspaper from coming because we couldn't afford it. My first job was mucking stalls in 7th grade, and in fact, until last year, I never had more than 2 weeks off in my entire life, and I
Mm,
am turning 49 in a couple days. Of course, it will already have passed by the time this is
yes. But
posted,
happy
but
birthday in advance.
thank you, thank
Couple
you.
days.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep, 24 again.
Again, it's a drag, but hey, we're Cancer twins. You're at
Yep,
the
high
beginning of the
five,
month, I'm
baby.
at the mid.
Oh, yeah, happy birthday to you coming up.
Well,
Birthday
you
girl
first. We'll
is
celebrate you first. Mine will
okay,
come later. Yeah. But
alright.
yeah, so you grew up really privileged, but
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
had a crumbling of that.
right. A lot of tension, a lot of disconnection, a lot of transference of feelings,
Mm,
um, both parents working, so, I was making dinner, and doing my own laundry around 12, 14 years old, um,
and like
and
you said,
we
that was pretty normal for back then. That doesn't mean that
Mhm.
it was healthy or it
Sure,
was right, but
exactly.
it was kind of the norm. Like, that's what a
The
lot of
norm.
parents did with their kids.
Correct, that's correct. And I was miserable. I was very sad. I was afforded therapy. I was sent to therapy, multiple times, throughout my life, the first being at 5 years old. That was the first time I
Wow.
wanted to end my life. I
Oh,
was 5 years old. And, after that, I was 14, wanted to end my life. There were things that were outside of my control that were hurting me emotionally to the point that I wanted them to stop. And I turned to food for coping. That was my comfort. There were times when I was little when uh, on weekends, we lived in a legit 17th century farmhouse
wow.
in the Northeast. And my father was renovating the home so that we could one day sell it, and we would do yard work and help him around the yard as little kids, and we would go inside and eat tuna sandwiches and pickles. That was the easy meal of choice, and so I
Mhm.
decided at
So
5 that I
cute.
could live for tuna sandwiches. That was my I call it my first existential crisis. So on my my Jimmy John's app, my tuna sandwich fave is saved as X Cree for existential crisis. It still does the job. It still does the job. Um,
Oh,
so
I love some dark humor.
I know.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I think, other people might think about that like, "Oh my god, that's horrifying." And you're like, yeah.
Yeah. That's how we deal with trauma.
Yeah. You have to, otherwise, what else? We're gonna
Right, right.
traumatize other people. It's not what we're
Yeah, we don't want that
in the
transference to
business for.
continue.
Yes, we're breaking the cycles here.
Exactly. God damn it, one way or another.
Yeah, it's been a long process to do that. So, yeah, so I guess we were all of us were sort of in therapy, except for my brother, who's this weird anomaly. Um, and so yeah, so I had one brother, and add in the fact that I was also adopted as an infant, and I had bonded with my birth mother for 5 days, and then I was taken away from her. So they call that the primal wound,
Oh,
or a mother wound. It's different than what other people have
yeah.
experienced. But I was set into a cycle of grief. I guess I screamed for the first 3 weeks of my life, and my mother, obviously that's exhausting. Like it's not like I
Sure.
expect my mother who's never had a child before to know how to deal with that. But the neighbor lady in the duplex we lived in told her to let me cry it out. That was the theory in those days. So I became emotionally independent at 3 weeks old, learned to self soothe. I sucked my thumb until I was, I think, 10, and had a blankie until I was 12, a lot of like just feeling insecure. And then I
Sure.
was plunged into middle school where I was bullied at school and bullied at home. I took when I was 14 and feeling like life wasn't really worth anything if it was going to be like that. I took a depression inventory with a psychologist, and these are tests, that parents pay for, to find
Okay.
out, what's wrong with my kid.
Right.
It's you. It's you.
It's a kid problem, not a parent
It
problem.
is.
Duh.
It's always a kid problem. So, I mean, and what I say about kids is, you're going to deal with the behaviors, whether they're good behaviors or bad behaviors, you're going
Yeah.
to deal with them. So, neglecting them emotionally is unwise.
That's not gonna do it.
Um,
Yeah.
but when you haven't looked at your own self and you are an emotionally immature parent, as we were talking about,
Yeah.
you're not really capable, and so that's something that seems strange for a child to not understand why an adult does things a certain way or doesn't do things a certain way, and comparing them with other parents that they encounter, with friends
Mhm.
parents, or teachers, other adults in the community. So I took this depression inventory, and out of 40 points, I was at a 36.
Oh, shit.
I won. I got
You
an
won
A on that
depression!
test. So an A
Congratulations?
minus on that test.
Question
But anyway,
mark?
I totally killed that test. And
Yeah, you did. Damn,
so the
girl.
therapist, the psychologist was like, did you know that you are dealing with this much depression? I was like, no, because it was just normal to me. And I
Yeah,
remember
and you're a kid.
your kid, yeah. And I remember telling a parent that, I just woke up lower than everyone else. I was being expected to behave like,
Mm,
to mask, to say everything's great,
yeah,
everything's happy. I love you, and I'm a well-tended child, and that was not true. And in fact,
right.
the psychologist invited me to a girls group with some troubled teens. And
Uh-oh.
I mean, some of these girls had problems that, I mean, they were very serious problems that involved the law, that involved abuse that I hadn't
Right.
experienced. And so I felt a little bit out of place. And one time I described an episode of physical violence in our home, and the therapist was like, "What?" And she, sort of looking at me incredulously, and the other girls are going, "Yeah, that like totally happened to me." And we are just sort of like, "Yeah, this is normal for us." And she just had this look of incredulity, like, and it's weird because I thought back later on in life, maybe she wasn't a mandated reporter at that time in
Right.
the early 90s. Maybe that was a thing
Yeah, I'm not
later.
sure.
But so, my family invested money that we kind of didn't really have into therapy. I wasn't put on any medication. I mean, and in fact, later on in life, just several decades later, the parent that I told, that I just felt lower than everyone else, said, I was thinking about that you said that. And I thought to myself, that sounds like depression. And I was like, didn't the
Good job.
psychologist, didn't the psychologist that, you know, you paid all this money for, didn't you get a report about that? Like, or did I
Yeah.
just go to be like independent in my therapeutic journey? Um,
Y
we saw a
what do you
family.
think what do you think that was? Do you think that the parent maybe didn't do any follow-up or look at the paperwork or really dig
No
into
idea.
the why of it? They were just kind of
No idea.
detached in that way from what was really going on?
There's a lot of blame, a lot of shame, a lot of humiliation, a lot of blame. Clearly was the black sheep and the scapegoat of the family, because I was different. And so, in order for that family dynamic, that toxic family dynamic to work, that role is required. And so that's the
Right.
role that you are put in. And as a
Congratulations
girl,
again.
I know, thanks. I won that contest too.
Yeah. Dang, girl, you're
I'm
racking
a
that up.
winner. I'm a total
You
winner.
really are.
I really am. I win everything.
Yeah, you're so good.
Oh gosh, I feel so encouraged.
I mean, honestly, goals.
Hashtag flex teeth.
Hashtag
I
goals.
mean, Hashtag blessed.
Yes, girl.
So I honestly have no idea. I, it, I don't know what the exchange was between them. I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess maybe they thought like, here, therapist that we're paying all this money for, this is your problem to solve.
Yeah, probably.
Um,
Sounds like it.
but I guess I gained a little bit of self knowledge and some confidence. We had also gone to family therapy, and that's where I developed a cracking my knuckles habit because it was so tense. And of course, I'm the focus. I'm on the hot seat every time because I'm the scapegoat. And both
Yeah.
parents are angry at the therapist, angry at me. This is all your fault, and you're not contributing to the family. And I mean, how does a child who's so depressed they win the depression inventory function at all, who's not sleeping, who's not eating well, who's not being listened to? How do they
Mhm.
participate? I mean, I could barely survive school being bullied there. But I mean, I was trained to be bullied, and of course that's the
Right.
dynamic I brought with me into social situations. I mean, I was always sort of a real introvert living up here in my own mind. Um, and they just sort of left me there,
Yeah.
didn't understand. They did, a different child. Was it because I
And
was adopted?
mhm.
Was it because I was a girl? But it was just, it came out as you're too sensitive, you're so smart. Why can't you figure this out? Um,
Yeah.
you don't love us. How can you treat us this way? And so, my mother's therapist told her, um, and she thought it was a good thing to tell me, that her therapist
Yeah.
told her that she didn't have to like me, she just had to love me.
What the fuck? How is she licensed?
So, I mean, I guess that's something you sort of keep in therapy. Like, you mean, you're a parent. I'm not a parent. What do I know? But I was a teacher. And like, there are some kids that are really challenging and kind of annoying, and you don't know what to do. And so you get frustrated and you want them to behave or perform for you, but they
Yeah.
can't or they won't. And there's some sort of defiance. But as the adult, that is your responsibility to find out what's going on. And it's not like the attempt wasn't made, but so
My
I
God.
did, I was clear that my mother felt this. She's a very loyal person, a very dedicated person, a person with a lot of integrity. So,
Mhm.
I'm not here, trying to bash people. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. They worked very hard to provide, a good life, so that we would be happy and have the opportunity to go on and live a successful life in the future. There were things due to an unexamined life that happened that affected me.
Yeah,
And so while,
definitely.
yes, I have had a career, multiple careers. And that's something I wanted to tell people, like, don't worry about not having it all figured out when you're young. Like, oh, I need to be in this job and blah, blah, blah. You
Right.
can be in like 100 careers these days. It's sort
Yep.
of choose your own adventure. Gone are the
Really.
days where you stayed at one company for 30 years. And in fact, if you stay at one company for 30 years, I'm going to think there's something probably wrong with you.
Right, right.
Like, don't you want any extra, responsibilities, a higher salary, et cetera?
Yeah,
Some people don't, and
variation.
that's okay too. But it's okay not to have everything figured out. No, practically no one is doing work related to their degree. Going back,
Case in point.
right, right. It's all one. You keep building upon the skills that you have, and that's a
Right.
good.
Yeah.
So.
Being adaptable is a nice skill to learn for sure,
Mhm,
especially in the
mhm.
the work world.
Yeah, I mean, and change was very hard for me,
Mm,
because every time something changed, it changed for the worse. So that
right.
was, my predictor, was that, okay, if something changes, it's not going to be a good thing. So I wanted things to stay
Yeah,
the same, even though what was going on and wasn't healthy. At least it was familiar, the devil.
right.
So
Well,
I was
like you
very
said, you had started experiencing negative change from 5 days old. So, like,
right,
at your cellular core, you knew every time there's change, it's it's gonna cause, like, this overwhelm and this stress, and like you said, negativity or something bad's gonna happen. So,
right.
it makes sense that at least if it's familiar, there's some level of safety attached to that, even if it's not truly good or healthy. It
It's the
makes total
comfort zone.
sense.
That's right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And of course, then we moved and the real estate bubble burst. And, what was supposed to be a positive change, was very difficult
Right.
for all of us. Um, but I was clear that my mother didn't like me. She felt obligated to fulfill her duties as a parent, but we really don't have anything in common whatsoever. That being said, and without divulging her story, her background is separation from her own mother and having,
Interesting.
that rejection there, circumstances beyond her control and her own traumatic experiences. But
Mm.
I don't believe that she sees those as traumatic or isn't aware that that's childhood trauma. So it's very difficult to educate someone like, hey, you were traumatized.
Right.
That's traumatic,
Ooh,
because,
yeah,
that the boomer generation comes from the greatest generation who was, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Don't talk about
100%.
anything. Don't talk about
Mhm,
anything, outside of the family.
mhm.
Don't get help. Don't share with friends. Don't, the therapies for crazy people. And
Right,
yet,
right.
you have the walking wounded who are operating like everything's normal and it's not. And so people cope with alcohol, they cope with food, they cope with drugs, they hide their, alternate sexual desires.
Mhm,
Um, and nothing is addressed. And so these things
right.
happen generation upon generation. You have the generational curse, if
Mhm,
you will, until you have a cycle breaker, until you have a person who is willing to look at this, feel the feelings, and go through it. So that's unfortunately the hard advice that I have
yeah,
to give, is that there's only one way through it. The longer you push it off, the bigger it grows and it's more painful to deal with. So, the first sort of real step that I took was, to leave the home, to move out on my own and have my own life. And I was working in a cancer center and I discovered that what I put out is what I get back. There was a great Reiki teacher in the palliative care center down the hall, and she was the nicest lady. And we would,
mhm.
have these long talks, and I just told her one day, like, I get it. I get it. And at that point, I walked into a bathroom and I just looked in the mirror at myself and I was like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you really? What defines you?
Yeah,
Yes, you can take all these personality tests to tell you, what you're like, but what do you believe for yourself? What are your own guiding principles? At that point is where I sort of started exploring religion. Now, my one parent was culturally Lutheran and the other one was culturally Jewish. So you've got this German Jewish dynamic,
wow,
post
yeah,
World War II, with its own challenges. But there was never any sort of like, religious talk, which is, maybe different than some people
interesting.
who are watching this channel. But there may be other people who are raised similar to me where, if especially in the Northeast, if you said you went to church, you were weird. Nobody asked about. Now that I live in the Southeast, people are like, oh, what church do you go to? And I'm like, we went to a non-denominational church. This is great. It's called the Unitarian Universalist Church.
Mhm,
And their tenet is believe what you want to believe and it's true for you and believe it with your whole heart. That's it. I mean, there's no Trinity. There's no like Jesus saved us type thing. It's just sort of like, more like just general God. But it was a peaceful
right.
place and we sang songs and I did plays there. And that's actually doing theater and music was where I had a place for my voice to come out.
I
And
love
as it
that.
turns out later, I learned at age 36 that my birth mother was a singer. And she,
Oh,
I,
really?
I became an admin, and she was also an admin. So there's actually
No
been weird
way.
adoption studies that find out that children who are
Yeah.
adopted wind up being they resemble their biological or their family of origin, their adoptive family, up until about the age 18. And then there's a weird
Interesting.
shift where they start to resemble, even if they haven't met them, they start to resemble their biological family. It's weird. It's so strange
That
that
I know that it's so
wind
fascinating.
up, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So
So you
yeah,
and your mom were both born like performers, just talented, meant to be on
right,
stage, or at
right.
least talented enough to be
Yeah.
on stage.
The reason why she had to give me up was, and of course I'm talking about, we did reunite at one point. Um, she didn't have the support of her family. So she was 18 or 19, about to turn 20, and just she didn't have any
Yeah.
resources. She would have kept me if she could. She wanted to. She was Catholic. Roe v. Wade was passed. I'm dating myself. Roe
Mm.
v. Wade was passed the year before I was born, so I could have just as easily been aborted. But she strongly believed that it was her responsibility to at least deliver a healthy child and give me to a family that really wanted a child. So that's what happened. But upon meeting her, and finding out my origin story, um, it was really interesting to be in a room with someone that I looked like, that I resembled on so many levels.
Wow.
Like we, they live in a very warm state, and so, and I have a half sister as well, who's 12 years younger,
Oh, wow.
and we all had our feet off in this very warm place, and I felt like I was looking at my own feet. It was so strange, and I asked.
Oh, that had to feel surreal.
It was very the first because I had done some research and I found a picture of her on a website that has to do with high school reunions, and there was a,
Mhm.
a yearbook photo of her on a stool with a microphone, and it could have been me. It could have been me.
That's
I'm
crazy.
her mini her. So,
Wow.
but I did ask her, like, is there anything about me that you would say is my birth father? And she was like, the eyes. I was like, oh, I have my father's eyes. He hightailed it off to Colorado and got himself killed in a bar fight. So that's fun. We'll never
Oh,
forget.
shit. Well, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, good time. So
Oh.
his family was going to support her, even though he had abandoned her and me. And then they changed their phone number. So
Oh.
there really
Well,
wasn't
screw
any
them.
choice, in the matter. So, but
Yeah, it
it
doesn't sound
was
like
nice
it.
to get that information and to feel. I described it like a desiccated sponge. You have a dried out sponge, you put it underwater, and it fills back up the way it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. That's the way I felt. I felt like I
Oh,
got
wow, that's
those
good.
5 days back. I learned about my conception story. I was conceived in a drunken stupor on a golf course. So
Oh,
there's
God,
that.
so romantic.
There's that. And apparently my birth father was hot, so that's cool.
Okay, duh.
Yeah,
It's kinda
right.
weird to hear that about your
Well,
own
yeah,
parents, but
and
I
that's
guess
sort of
you didn't have a
that
relationship with him, so
yeah, that's sort of like I have one mother who doesn't want anything to do with me and is very rigid and non-responsive, and then you have another one who wants to talk about our sex lives, and I'm like,
everything. Is there a happy medium?
"I no." So,
No.
really, I was like, "This is too much for me." And, there's sort of just questionable information, whether certain things were true or not. So I just was like, I
Oh,
can't do this.
yeah.
And I just said,
That's a lot.
respectfully, you know. But so yeah, so the at that point I was in church and I had my own conversion experience at about 19 years old. And was going to a Methodist church, which is kind of like Christianity light. It's a decent group of human beings, although
Did you
they're
say
just
Christianity light or
light,
Christianity like? It's like
light.
diet Christianity.
Yeah, it is. It
That's
is
what
like
you're
just the
saying.
light
Yeah,
back in the day.
yeah,
There's no sugar in it.
exactly.
Um, I mean, they're just like about getting together and hugging each other and eating food. Like that's basically it.
Right.
And they have good music. So, and of course, I was always about music. So I became a worship leader, and for 9 years I was behind a microphone, children's leader, young adult leader, all the things. Really put myself in it. I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be safe, and
Yeah.
I was not. I was
Mm.
hardcore not. And being plunged into the world with this culture of me being the scapegoat, I didn't know where I fit in. So that was a place for me to kind of get my feet on the ground. The first time I was doing a play through one church, and um, they, just generally were like, "Hey, you're welcome to come to church on Sunday." And there was one rehearsal where I couldn't stop crying. I mean, I was in total crisis mode. And they were like, "Hey, why don't you come on Sunday?" So I came on Sunday. And the couple sitting in front of me just turned around because I was sobbing through the entire service. And the couple in front of me were like, "You look like you could use a hug," and just hugged me. And it was just so kind. So there was kindness there. And
Oh, yeah.
while I'm not practicing now, I haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and I still do believe in humanity. I'm sort of more of a
Mhm.
humanist, the kindness of others. There are some good people, and of course, not all good people are all good all the time, as not all bad people are all bad all the time. So,
Exactly.
you just have to be careful, and trying to figure out who is a safe person after coming out of,
Yeah.
abuse and neglect is can be challenging as well.
What things helped you figure out were safe people for you to be around? Like, what tools did you get to kind of make that distinction?
That's really part of the reparenting, where I figured out what my values were and what I believed and how I wanted to operate in the world. And I tried to find similar people. Um, and of course, just because you feel comfortable sharing everything about yourself with someone doesn't necessarily mean there's a safe person. So I learned the hard way that
Mhm.
not everyone is trustworthy. But you know as you uh, as you meet people who are passionate about or committed to doing good and being good, you see the evidence of goodness and
Right.
kindness in their life. I think a Christian would call it, you see the Holy Spirit in them. You see that they have the fruits of the Spirit that that are their guiding principles. That
Right.
being said, not every Christian is a nice person. And of course, there are also, as we know, spiritual abusers and very unsafe people. But somebody coming out of a family culture that makes they feel lost in the world is subject to falling into another situation that's exactly similar, an abusive relationship, um, or another high demand
Right.
organization. So uh, you know, I did find some safe people in some churches, and then after a while, I just got very uh, uncomfortable pacing the box that I was in the Northeast. I couldn't buy a house, wasn't meeting anyone because I really wanted to get married and have children. I couldn't make any more money. I couldn't get a better job. I couldn't go anywhere with my music. I was like pacing this box of
Mhm.
limitations. And I met this beautiful woman at the cancer center that I was working at. And she this woman has like 3 PhDs. She's like most intelligent person I've
Jeez.
ever met. And
Wow.
she Dr. Susan, and Dr. Susan, I was teaching her stepdaughter some basic vocal and basic piano. And she just asked me, why aren't you in New York or LA or Nashville doing music? And I was like, yeah, right. That's not how people make money. I'm not good enough for that. And she stopped, like, she's like, Yeah, you are. And I
She's
just,
like, "The fuck did you say?"
she's like, Are you kidding? And I just thought, well, I can't do that because that's what I
Mm.
was always told. You can't do that. And,
Yeah.
you need something to fall back on. And um, she's like, Is it money? Because I'll pay. And I'm like, you are the dumbest, smartest person I ever met. Are you kidding me? But I
That's
really
so
took it very
kind.
smart. Yeah, to think of, someone with that level of belief in you. I know how to set up a life, find a place to live, get a job, all the things. I have a good work ethic. I was
Mhm.
trained to have a good work
For
ethic.
sure.
I can make it work. And even if I can only create another box, at least I won't have to shovel snow anymore. And that was the point where I started figuring out my own feelings, because up until that point, you're just sort of on this autopilot that, you know, you don't really you don't really know. You check in with yourself, but you don't really know what's going on. You just feel. You just do, and
Mhm.
it's unexamined, and
Go through the motions.
the emotional immaturity is not being aware of, not being familiar with what's going on for yourself. So I should preface by saying I skipped the whole part where I went into a 12-step program. So I have multiple family members who were involved in 12-step programs. Um, and I went to Overeaters Anonymous. And so if you're not familiar, I just want to let you know it can be a good place for people to receive help. The whole premise of a 12-step program is helping other people that have
Right.
issues like yours. And so if you're dealing with alcohol use or food use or drug use or sex use, there is a group where you can go, you can be anonymous, you can share what you need to share, listen to what other people have to say, and get tools in order to move forward in your life. And so I had done that for food and had lost half my body weight. Once I got there, I had no idea what to do, because everybody was treating me differently because I looked a different way. And I thought that was
Mhm.
bullshit. Now that you
Yeah.
know, I'm getting your attention and you like me better because I'm socially
Yeah.
acceptable to you and with attention from men. Like, I know why you want to take me on a date. It's not because I'm a good person and I've reparented myself and I'm emotionally maturing and I'm good work ethic and I'm funny as shit. It's because I look like a
Y
certain
yeah.
person to you. So my weight was always sort of a good filter, and I couldn't filter out safe people anymore. And I also
Mhm.
found that with the sort of obsessive compulsive type of personality, the addictive personality that I had, I was I was working on my program, I call it working on your program, working on my program with such intensity that I was hurting myself. I always describe it like this: if
Interesting.
you've ever raked a lawn in your life, right? You start raking and you're pulling up the leaves and you're clearing it out and it looks pretty good. And then you notice that there's like sort of old growth underneath and like scrape that a little bit. And then you're kind of pulling up little pebbles and stuff, but you keep scraping and scraping and scraping until like you've got a hole in your grass,
Mm.
in your lawn.
Yeah.
And that's what I did to my spirit. That's what I did to my soul, trying
Wow.
to just feel better, trying to figure it out, wondering where the freaking blueprint is. How am I supposed to live this life? I feel like I wasn't supposed to be here. Here I am. I just showed up and I got ostensibly, ignored from, week 3. What am I supposed to do now? And I don't like how this is feeling. I've already been suicidal. I've already wanted to end my life so many times. What am I supposed to do now? So
Yeah.
the impetus to move somewhere else and make a life. What would I do? At multiple times I would ask myself in life, what would I do if I made the decision? Because it felt like other people were making decisions for me. And it's very daunting if you've not been offered the opportunity to make
Yeah.
change in your own life, you know, especially coming out of a high demand family or family cult or institutional whatever setting. How do I get in the driver's seat of my own life? So
Mhm.
I took the opportunity to move to the Southeast, sight unseen, and make a life. And that was one of the best decisions, was to relocate. Primary objective was to buy a home. Here we are in my yellow
Hey.
walls, very happy in
I
our own home. And,
Yes, I love it, I love it.
yeah, and do a lot with music and do a lot with helping other people be successful. And but I was still working a job that was sort of thrust upon me because I didn't really have the opportunity. I didn't really talk a lot about that, but my I had a narcissistic grandparent who sort of ran the family, as the I want to say atriarch. I'm not trying not to identify this person, the leader of the clan, and that person had put together a irrevocable trust fund for all the grandchildren's college, and then never put any money in it. So at the last minute, we almost didn't go to school.
That's so devastating for the kids.
Yeah,
Like, what would be the point of telling you that there's an irrevocable trust,
yeah.
knowing that someday you're gonna find out there's nothing in it?
That was just the control that person enacted over the family. Just kidding. Let's pull the wool out. So
That's some psychological warfare.
it is.
That's next level
It,
fucked up.
yeah, and again, of course, because of the financial challenges that we had because of the real estate boom, or real estate bubble bursting. I mean, boom in that way.
Mhm.
All the investments were in real estate, and of course, that was all gone. So, I had gotten into one of those pretty 4-year private colleges, and I wasn't allowed to go. It's too expensive. So I wound up going to a state school.
Mhm.
Um, Absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I did say that, well, if I have to go here, then I'm going to study theater. So I did. I studied theater, and then I was told
Good.
you need something to fall back on. So I became a teacher, and I was a teacher for 5 years, working with kids with learning disabilities. And actually, that's sort of to in terms of seeing myself as not broken. All these children, all they needed was the right environment to be successful. My
Mhm.
brother's degree was in agriculture, and he can tell you what grows in a 1 foot square space in terms of water level, sunshine in the seasons and everything. And that's the same for kids. We don't just automatically know what will work for them, but you try this and you try that. But they just require, the right soil and the right level of water, and they can
Yeah.
thrive.
Yeah.
I worked at a school for kids with learning disabilities where we did that, and the school secretary and I were BFFs because I had been. I actually, in order for my brother to get the associates, I volunteered to not graduate. I was a junior, and my family basically said we can't send you both. And so you have a job, you'll be fine. You'll go back to school and finish your degree, but he won't. So I didn't graduate with my classmates.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
like again, change that's not good, right?
Yeah.
So I worked as a secretary in a legal office. Um, and that was, assisted by my parent that was an attorney. So that really uh I learned how to do officey things. And so the school secretary and I were naturally friends because I understood her pain, she understood mine. And I remember one day we were talking because I was actually trying to get her to come to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting with me. She was talking about wanting to lose weight and, wanted to know what I was doing. And because, I had a really drastic change to go in 2 years. I worked at that place for 4 years, to go looking one way to looking, half
Sure. Yeah.
off my size. So, students would come back for graduation and wouldn't recognize me. So, we talked a lot. And at one point, she's like, I really love you. I had actually this poor woman, her son passed tragically in an ATV accident, and I walked her through the funeral. I
Oh
supported her
God.
through that. She was incredible though. She's like, "Yeah, I don't expect anyone to like change their life just because I'm grieving." It's like she's like, "I
See,
know other
that's an
people are
emotionally
going
mature
through
person.
it."
It doesn't mean, yeah, it doesn't mean the grief sucks less. It just means, like, she just understands, like, the world doesn't stop turning for everyone else just because, you know, her world did, I guess, but
That's
it
exactly what she
sucks.
was saying. Yeah. She was able to verbalize that. So
Yeah.
you're exactly right pointing out she was emotionally mature. And she was like, "I really love you." And I was like, "'Cause, that's what we do." And
Oh,
she said, "No." And I was like, that's exactly my reaction. I was like, "What?
what?
What do you mean?" And she's like, "No, that's not how you respond to love, Cara." And I
What am
was
I
like,
supposed to do then?
holy shit. Like, I can't receive love.
Mm,
So there's little sort of like guideposts along the way that sort of lit this way into
yeah,
healing, this like journey through it. And it all, sort of lays on, what is it? Builds on itself. So here I am. I've developed a life in another city. And one of the reasons I left was because, you know, even though we were adults, really my family just thought I would go off and do my own thing and then come back for holidays. That was the expectation. That was verbalized. "We didn't expect
wow.
you to want to talk to us anymore." And so, I remember at multiple stages in my 20s, just laying on the floor, just being like, "I just need you to call me sometimes." Everybody wants to be known and loved for who they are. That
Yeah,
intimacy, especially when, you grow up in a family with a lot of people and then all of a sudden you're by yourself. Nobody knows you, nobody knows anything about you. It's all conjecture and you have to like keep telling people who you are. There's no continuity, there's no intimacy, and I don't mean of the sexual kind, I mean of just the
of
emotional kind of
course.
knowing who you are, knowing what's going on for you. So, and that's sort of an abandonment of sorts.
Mhm.
So, I was dropped off at college and, came home for Thanksgiving with minimal contact. And in fact, up until the pandemic, really, um, I could count on one hand how many times either parent called me of their own volition on the phone. So, you know, I was told by one of them, relationships are hard. Not really. They're not that
They're
hard.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you could pick up the phone at any time. In fact, that's what I've asked for. I have verbalized, wanting contact with you for like I'm trying to tell you that I do love you and I do want a relationship with you and you're not reciprocating. Why am I the
Right.
one at various points I would realize in certain relationships I was doing all the work. I was
Yeah.
making all the effort. And I
Mhm.
thought to myself, what if I stopped making any effort? What would happen? And all those relationships went away. And that was good enough for me. I'm
Yeah.
you can't be giving 100% to maintain a relationship. And if you
With
are,
any
you
relationship, especially
know,
with the parent though, and that's a very unpopular opinion, I feel like, but
yeah,
it's a very strong one that I carry, is that even when the child is grown, the parents are always going to be in that position of initiating that communication or love to their children, not all the time, but especially in this type of situation where you verbalize like that's what you need from your parent. Why is it always the phone works both ways, or it's always an excuse, it's always the passing of the buck of these emotionally immature parents to initiate contact, or maybe they only contact when it's something to do with them, like they're never unselfishly contacting you or making
Right.
an effort. And that's devastating, and it is a really deep wound.
Because it makes you feel like, well, don't you want to?
Right,
But
exactly.
we've already
Exactly, I'm your
established that they
kid.
don't like me, so and we have nothing in common, so what's the point? But when your child is grieving or having a difficult time, even as an adult, like, does it just not concern you? And a
Right.
lot of what I got was, well, we don't want to hear the negative. You're just negative all the time. You're always coming to us for something we can't give you, which is not what they said because they can't verbalize that. But I liken it
Essentially,
to an
yeah.
empty well. You go for this is an old school word. You go for succor, succor. You go for healing, for a balm. You go for balm balm. You
Right, right,
go
um,
for comfort, and it's just not there. It doesn't exist.
yeah.
But they can't even comfort themselves properly. So you're really asking for something that doesn't exist. And it's very challenging because you outgrow your family of origin, and sometimes you have to meet people where they are and leave them there.
Mhm. And then
So,
there's also the flip side of that is recognizing that they can't give that to you, but then the boundary of not trying to parent your own parents or
right.
baby your own parents in order to keep that relationship alive, because then
Mhm.
that essentially drains your own life force. But yeah, it can be very disabling of your own growth by having to reach out and like try to fill that parent role.
And it can be natural to want to educate your parents. If you would only just see this, if you would only do the work that you've done is very difficult. Not everybody is prepared to do that. That takes, a therapist. It can take somatic therapies, which is another thing
Mhm.
we can discuss about trauma. I mean, I didn't get my PTSD diagnosis until my early 40s.
Mm.
So that was very helpful. Finding the right therapist is something I wanted to discuss too. So I do have some advanced education in the psychology area, and uh, I learned that, different mental health workers do different jobs for us. So a psychologist, a doctor of psychology, is really a person who does testing. They're not necessarily going to do talk therapy, but they may talk with you through some things. A counselor who might have a social work degree or might have a certification from the state as a therapist, can provide mental health counseling, usually talk therapy. Um, they might also have certifications in other areas, certain therapies such as EMDR, which has been proven to be
Mhm.
helpful with people with PTSD. And so, sort of to demystify EMDR, it's something that is working neurologically within your brain, stimulating both sides of your brain while you process. You sort of get a 360 overview of your experience, and then you talk about the beliefs surrounding that changing from I'm unworthy or I'm dirty to I am worthy, I'm pure. um, and you can sort of going through this process with a certified licensed professional to make to move and make progress.
Mhm.
And it winds up being something that's it's non-intrusive. So if you have done EMDR and you felt traumatized, just gonna say that you might not be working with a person who's doing it correctly.
Yeah, that's a good
The thing
point.
that I'm working on now is called OEI, Operative Experiential Integration, and it is also a two-sided, both sides of your brain, and it works by, I'll take my glasses off, but covering up of one eye and discussing how you feel, and then covering up the other eye,
Oh, interesting.
discussing how you feel because it's different. And you
Yeah.
wind up, uh, this has been helpful for me with self regulation. So even before I came on here, I did a little bit of like, okay, how are we feeling about this experience? How are we feeling about this experience? And you sort of like get different sides of how you feel because your optic nerve is the only thing on the exterior sort of that touches the exterior of your body that touches your brain. This can be very powerful. Those are some things to explore. um, and as I explore these different sides of my personality, the different sort of voices in my head, if you will, and not to the level of having different characters in a system as you'd
Of
find
course.
in like
Yeah.
a DEI, but we all have like the shitty committee that lives in our
1,000%. A lot of people on that board in
I
my
picked
brain.
that up in a 12-step program, the shitty committee.
I love
You
it.
can't do this, you're dumb, you're stupid, clean your room, you're such a loser, all these terrible things that we say to
Yeah.
ourselves. It's a shitty committee. It's not you.
Right.
It's not the you, the central you. And we can learn to develop these fractured pieces of our personality that we're not able to develop while we were living in survival mode. So you
Mhm.
come
Ooh,
out
yeah.
of a family of origin that was toxic and you heal yourself, you get rid of the toxicity. Now what? So being able to rebuild and develop areas of your personality. I remember being in the 12-step program and one of the girls, bless her, she was so cute. She was like, "So what are you going to do to nurture yourself today?" I was like, "Nurture myself? What the fuck are you talking about?" Of course, being
Uh,
from the Northeast, swearing is just punctuation, so my apologies.
exactly.
But, you know, I had no idea what she was even talking about. I didn't know. I know what the word means,
Of
but
course.
you don't know it until you know it for yourself. And that's the
Right.
same thing with trying to educate your family about trauma and they can't see it. They don't know it
Yeah.
until they know it for themselves. So there's no way for a person who doesn't have empathy or understanding to have that for you. So
Mhm.
it's an impossible task and it's not your fault. It's not something
Oh,
that you did.
important distinction.
You were not a bad kid. They just didn't know how to do it. They still don't know how to do
Yeah.
it. And actually leads me to the end of my story, if you will, and where I'm at today was that, just over a year and a half ago, again, I asked for more contact and I was promised that I would get contact. I got a single phone call in a year. And
Wow.
so I just, my New Year's resolution was let them think what they want, let them do what they want, ostensibly within myself being no contact. Just I know I'm not going to get it. This is a repeated pattern. Discussions are futile. Like this, we're not going to have change here. We haven't had change for the last 30 odd years. It's not going to change now, especially as they get older. And my other family member, my brother will be like, "Yeah, but they're your parents. They're
I hate
older and
that.
they're going to
Yeah.
die." And I'm like, "I know, isn't that sad? Isn't that
For
sad?"
them, isn't that sad for them
Yes,
that they don't
isn't
want
that
a
sad?
relationship with their child?
And I mean, it is sad for me. I've been asking for decades
Yeah.
to have some sort of involvement, to have them want to have a relationship with me. I just could you please love me?
Right, and that's not something any child, no matter your age, should have to ask for and beg for and grovel for. Like, that's
Yeah.
not like
Or
and it's a
perform
very painful
for.
thing because I too am in that same situation with parents where it's like, what is so difficult to about me to love? Like, why is it so difficult for you to wanna make the effort? Like, as just a
Yep.
human being, I can't like, I it's hard for me to grasp, and it's a very painful pill to swallow because on a logical level, I know it's never going to change. I understand that at this point, there's not been change and there won't be change, but that doesn't make it any less painful to handle or to come to grips with. It still
Right.
sucks.
and it informs your belief about yourself. I guess I'm just
Yeah.
unlovable. But then when other people tell you they love you, do you believe them? It's very
Right.
difficult. You're a mom, so I hope that you've been able to rectify that or experience that unconditional love. And unconditional love really should only be between parents and children, right? Your
Preach.
kid, there
Yes.
should be nothing your child does to make you stop loving them, and treating them with respect and with dignity,
Agreed.
because you made them, or you wanted a child so bad you took somebody else's. So
Damn.
yeah.
Right. And
So
I think even being, I know you're not a parent, but I still 100% respect your feelings towards that, and I agree with it, where it's like, even now, even though I'm a parent, it's honestly made it even more difficult for me to understand how my parents did what they did, or how they're not doing what feels innate and natural to me
right,
as just a parent, but as a human being, like, caring about another human being.
right.
That it makes it even harder for me to accept it, because it's
Mhm.
so different than what I
Especially when
experienced.
they have it for another child in the family, and they know how to behave in public. They
Exactly.
know how to do it,
Mhm.
but behind closed doors, you know, I had a friend once tell me, like, "Oh my god, your mom's so awesome," and I'm like, "Yeah, you don't have to live with her."
Yeah. She's awesome
She
in public.
she told my mother that I said that.
Oh, shit.
I didn't think I
Ugh.
was gonna live past that.
It's true though, but, they don't wanna hear that.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
you know, so it wound up that, a whole ass year later, after this letter exchange and this single phone call, I got a random text message on a random Tuesday that was like, "Well, I'm sure you're mad at me because you're not talking to me." And I'm like, "Why didn't you think I was mad like 6 months ago? I'm actually not mad because I knew this was going to happen. This is what always happens."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I was like, we talked twice last year. You called once, I called once, and hell, I was on video for Christmas and you didn't want to talk to me. So, you know, like, what are we, where is this even coming from?
yeah,
You made this bed. So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then I got a message, from my mother asking for us to have conversations about this, and I'm like, you mean the same conversations we've been having all these years? No, because let them. I'm not
That's
doing
it.
this cycle anymore. The cycle is broken. The cycle is over. I don't care to anymore.
Mm,
And so that's when I was told, oh well, relationships are hard. No, they're not. Do what you say you're going to do. Let's start with that. Hold yourself accountable for the things that you haven't done. Maybe say an apology. So in your 12 steps, you do a step 4, which is an inventory of things that you've done or not done that have harmed other people. And then on your step 5, you tell that to someone else. You confess to what you've done, and then you go about making amends, fixing the things that you've done. Now, you're not trying to like re-traumatize anybody, but you're addressing things in order to absolve yourself and to increase your, relationships. When I gave my 5th step to my mother, I apologized for being alive, basically. I'm
oh
sorry I
shit.
disappointed you. I'm sorry I'm not the daughter you wanted. I'm sorry that I stole from you. I'm sorry that I annoyed you, frustrated you, talked back to you, disrespected you. All the things that I thought that I had done wrong. I really wanted a
Mhm.
blank slate between us. And several years later, now, of course, she didn't actually start doing that sort of work until after 10 years in, because she thought the point of going was to just stop drinking as opposed to, like, working on yourself. So she did, and that it is. I don't want to detract anything. That's a really incredible thing to have that much sobriety. It's like over 25 years at this point. She's helped so many people along the way, except me. So no, but
I wasn't gonna say it.
I know when I got my amends, I don't remember what they said because they didn't include the words "I'm sorry" and "I love you." I
Damn.
just threw them out because this just was irrelevant at that
That's
point.
all you wanted and needed to
Yeah,
hear,
that's all.
probably.
Yeah, it would be so easy, but it's just so difficult. So, um, I ran my mother's social media for her because it was too difficult for her in her job. They're not even retired yet. They're almost in their 80s and they're still working.
Oh, wow.
Talk about work ethic, right? Um, so I made a comment on there's a trauma based therapist that I followed, and I made a comment that said, so it was something about black sheep and scapegoats, and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. My New Year's resolution was to let them. I'm not doing it anymore. And thanks, algorithm. The algorithm showed my mother that comment.
Are you shitting me?
Oh no, because when you follow each other, you can see everybody else's what they're doing.
Oh, why
But
that
but
one?
it'll be random. It'll be random. And I'm
Oh,
sort of like I'm trying to be helpful and sharing experience, but and that's why I was really hesitant to do this video because I just didn't I don't want the backlash.
yeah,
Um, at this point though, it's like, if you wanted me to speak about you differently, you would have behaved differently.
correct,
And so
correct.
this is just my truth. And um you've made your choices and I've made mine. So she wrote on this post,
Oh, no.
not doing what with like 10 exclamation points and question marks. And I was like, I don't think you really want to be the toxic parent on a toxic parent post by a toxic parent expert. Like, you're about to get attacked by the internet. And I just wrote back, you really want to do this on Instagram? And within an hour, I deleted the whole thing, my original post. It was just disappeared
Oh,
because like
man.
nobody needs to see that. And like if I learned that somebody felt that way, or I wanted to know more, I would pick up the phone and
Pick up
call
the
them,
fucking
ask
phone.
them what's going on. I don't understand. Help me to understand so we can repair our relationship. No.
But isn't that crazy that her or anyone else, like, a lot in this generation are more comfortable saying something like that on social media, on in
Yeah.
public, rather than just having a conversation and
Yeah.
addressing it directly.
Right.
It's like this intentional avoidance.
Right. That's absolutely true. So to sort of close out the story, several months later, I received an email, saying, well, so you're happy being no contact. And we as parents could never do that.
Okay.
And, we hope you find people along your journey to help you along, like
Mm,
pseudo parents. And I'm like, all right, so you're basing how I feel again. You're obviously mad at us. You obviously hate us,
mhm.
to based on one letter from a year and a half ago, a text message to my father, and a single Instagram post. Because you haven't spoken to me in a year, but this is your conclusion. Okay. Again,
Got it.
them. Let them. This is the
Have fun with
level of
that.
maturity we're dealing with or choosing not to deal with. Um, And so, I just was like, all right, if this is the decision you want to make, based on limited information, because you can't pick up a phone,
Right.
go, go have at it. I was really talking about the fact that, Dad, you promised to call and you didn't. And Mom, you promised to schedule a Zoom call because we used to get on Zoom calls to talk about
Mhm.
business and our social media. She was like, "Oh, this was so great. We should do this again soon. Let me look at my schedule." Never happened.
Yeah.
That was 8 months before all this. So, you it's not that I even asked you. You put that out in the universe that this is what you were going to do, and you did not. I'm sorry
Deliberately
if that
chose not
makes
to.
you, yeah, if that makes you uncomfortable, that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Again, you made this bed. And so, the response was, well, obviously you think that we didn't pay enough attention to you and we're terrible parents. And this is the maturity I'm
Classic.
talking about.
Classic.
Very classic of,
Ugh.
this conflagration of like, woe is me, I'm a martyr,
Yep.
you obviously blah blah blah, and it's your fault, and all their behavior is your fault and all the things. And so I just wrote back that, like, no, I was talking about very specific examples. That's one thing emotionally immature people will do. They will generalize. You always, you
Mhm.
never.
Yep.
We're not talking about specific examples. And I said, no, specifically, I'm talking about this incident and this incident
Yeah.
that you cannot take ownership for. I didn't say you were bad parents. I don't even think that you were bad parents. And so, I just thought it was really uh, interesting that they could, uh, make these inferences based on zero information. And so I just said,
Yeah.
your own feelings of inadequacy as parents, that's a you problem. I
Yeah.
I never said anything like that.
Mhm.
And so my father chimes in finally and replies back, how dare you tell us how we feel?
Oh, okay. All right.
And I just was
Was
like, "All right, like,
That's real
this is the end
rich.
of it. This is the end of it. Like, 3 times you have told me how I feel." So I just wrote a list of ironies. I'm like, "This is my last email. These are the ironies that I'm dealing with. It's okay for you to tell me how I feel. It's not okay for me to tell you how you feel. You wanna generalize instead of take accountability. You want a relationship, but you don't make any effort, etcetera, etcetera." And I just went through, it was like 8 of them. And I'm like, I don't wish you any harm. I don't wish you any harm. I know at some point, you know, my parents are aging, they're elderly, legally at this point. At some point, they're not going to be here and we're
Right.
not going to have any contact. And I probably will not attend their services. And oh, well,
Yeah.
it's not that I have hatred. I just don't, there's no
It's almost
connection.
indifference at this point. But I think another thing that is should be pointed out about the parent-child thing here is that no adult child goes no contact with their parent for no reason because they want to. Children, we don't none of us want to go no contact with our parents. There's all of these cries for help over spanning over years and years and years, but that cord is never severed by the child without good reason, without there being a trail of like pain and longing and whatever it is and
Right.
hurt. Like we don't get to that point for no reason. So it's not, oh, we're just cutting you out of our lives for no reason. We think you're terrible people out of nowhere. Like no, we don't. It takes a lot to get us as adult children to that point. But by the time we reach that point, we're ready to sever the cord and focus finally on our own healing instead of trying to heal our parents to make us lovable to them, because that's something we
Right.
can never achieve.
That's correct. Those are all excellent points. And the point of you healing is that you get to be happy.
Mhm.
You get to be happy. And
Yeah.
it is sure, in every change, there is grief, there is loss. Sometimes they're not great changes, as I
Yeah.
experienced. But the level of freedom, of not wondering when I'm going to get a call, and the interesting thing is, their numbers aren't blocked at any given time. This has been 6 months now. At any given time, they could have reached out
Yeah.
by phone, or even they know where I live. They've been here before. They can show up on my doorstep. I mean, what would separate you from your son? Ain't no mountain high enough, right?
Come hell or high water, that's
We're
my baby. I don't care how old he
right,
is.
right. So you just sort of wonder, like, am I guess I'm not I they wanted a baby so bad. Why?
Right.
I was supposed to fulfill a need. And, there was a lot of, trying to prove to the narcissistic grandparent that, um, that they were worthy, they're performing, you know, worried about what everyone else thought, but completely unconcerned what their daughter, thought.
Yeah.
So what
Hmm.
you're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear it. And I never wanted this to be. I'd mentioned in our first conversation, never wanted this to be a revenge
Of course
thing
not.
or
Yeah.
sharing someone else's drama. There's a lot more sensational stories that have happened in my life, some very tragic and disturbing things, but I don't live in those anymore. I didn't spend the majority of 40 odd years in survival mode to continue to live there. And that's sort of that's the last step, is letting go of the trauma
Mm.
as if it didn't happen. And you can get there. And I'm getting emotional. You can experience freedom and you can let that go. It does exist. You don't have to live in survival mode. You don't have to live in freeze mode. You can live free in your own happiness that you have created, nurturing and loving yourself. It's enough. You are enough.
You didn't sign a permission slip for that field trip, did you? Let's keep the conversation going. Tell me in the comments what stood out to you and leave any questions you might have. Healing is always possible, and it often starts with simply acknowledging our past and giving validation to our own experiences. So yeah, if you found this conversation helpful, leave a thumbs up on YouTube or leave a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening. And there's more than 30 other episodes and stories like this on the Culture Shock playlist, so be sure to check that out next. Oh, and if you like my hat, go to kendraleebryan.com and you can grab one of these bad boy trucker hats. There's a lot of other cool merch on there as well.